You are sitting there, perhaps late at night, surrounded by the evidence of your ambition. There are stacks of books on your nightstand promising to optimize your habits, rewire your brain, and unlock your hidden potential. Your browser history is a graveyard of articles on productivity hacks, morning routines, and the secrets of billionaires. You have meditated, you have journaled, you have fasted, and you have visualized your success with the intensity of a desperate prayer. By all objective metrics, you are doing everything right. You are the architect of your own evolution, tirelessly chipping away at the marble to reveal the masterpiece within. And yet, if you strip away the layers of positive affirmations and social performance, you are likely feeling something very different from the limitless state you were promised. You are tired. It is a deep, bone-weary exhaustion that sleep does not touch. Worse than the fatigue is the gnawing, quiet doubt that has taken up residence in the back of your mind. Despite all the optimization, despite all the effort, you do not feel fixed. In fact, you feel more broken, more inadequate, and more anxious than when you started. You feel as though you are running a race where the finish line moves further away with every step you take. We need to talk about the dark side of this pursuit. We need to explore the paradox of progress, the counterintuitive truth that the modern obsession with self-improvement is often the very thing sabotaging your actual success. We have been sold a narrative that life is a problem to be solved and that you are a project to be completed. But this mindset has trapped us in a cycle of perpetual dissatisfaction, turning the noble desire for growth into a sophisticated form of self-torment. To understand why this is happening, we must look at the world we inhabit. We have undergone a profound societal shift. In the past, humans lived in what philosophers call a disciplinary society. This was a world of should and must not. You were told what to do by external authorities, your boss, your church, your government. The boundaries were clear, and while life was restrictive, the pressure came from the outside. But today, we live in an achievement society. The negative constraints of you must have been replaced by the toxic positivity of you can. You can be anything. You can achieve anything. You can optimize everything. Psyche. It sounds like freedom, but it is actually a far more insidious form of slavery. When the driving force is, you can, there is no upper limit to what is expected of you. You become your own tyrant. You hold the whip in your own hand. Because you can do more, you feel that you must do more. Every moment of rest feels like a missed opportunity. Every flaw feels like a moral failing. You exploit yourself willingly, believing that you are realizing your potential, when in reality, you are burning yourself out in a war against your own limitations. This pressure creates a specific kind of neurosis. We are no longer suffering from the repression of our desires. We are suffering from an excess of positivity. We are drowning in the demand to be essentially perfect. This is why depression and burnout are the signature afflictions of our time. They are not signs of weakness. They are the friction heat of a soul running on a treadmill that has no off switch. The achievement subject finds themselves fighting a war with themselves, wounded by an internalized battle where they are both the aggressor and the victim. Consider the mechanism of this trap. It starts with a vision of an ideal self. You stand in front of the mirror, and you don't just see the reflection of who you are today, you see a ghost. You see the slimmer, richer, calmer, more productive version of yourself that you could be if you just worked a little harder. This gap, the distance between who you are and who you think you should be, is where the pain lives. Every time you engage in self-improvement from this place of lack, you are subconsciously reinforcing the belief that the current version of you is not enough. You are training your brain to identify with the gap rather than the growth. This creates a state of chronic internal division. You are split into two: the manager, who is demanding results, and the employee, who is constantly failing to meet the quotas. You judge yourself for feeling tired. You criticize yourself for losing focus. You view your natural human emotions, anxiety, fear, boredom, not as signals to be understood, but as defects to be engineered out of the system. You are treating your soul like software that needs debugging, forgetting that a human being is not a machine to be optimized, but a life to be lived. Furthermore, this obsession with the self feeds the ego in the most dangerous way. The ego loves self-improvement. It loves the drama of the struggle. It loves to tell stories about how hard you are working, how much you are sacrificing, and how distinct you are from the average people who aren't on this grind. But this obsession with the self isolates you. It cuts you off from the flow of life. When you are constantly monitoring your own performance, checking your own vitals, and analyzing your own thoughts, you are trapped in a hall of mirrors. You lose the ability to connect deeply with others or the work itself because you are too busy watching yourself do it. You become a self-conscious observer of your own life rather than a participant in it. The tragedy is that this hyper-focus on the self actually blocks the very success you crave. True greatness, whether in art, business, or relationships, requires a state of flow where the self disappears. It requires you to merge with the task at hand, to lose your self-consciousness in a cause greater than your own optimization. But you cannot enter that state if you are constantly poking and prodding at your own psyche, asking, "Am I doing this right? Is this making me better?" You are like a gardener who keeps digging up the seed to see if it has grown, inadvertently killing it in the process. We must also confront the biological reality of this addiction. Our brains are wired for novelty and anticipation. When you buy a new book on productivity or start a new diet protocol, your brain releases dopamine, the molecule of more. You feel a surge of excitement. You feel the high of the expectation of change. But as neurobiology teaches us, this pleasure is about the appetite, not the satisfaction. It is the thrill of the hunt. Once the new habit becomes routine, the dopamine fades. The new you becomes just the normal you, and the emptiness returns. So you look for the next fix, the next guru, the next strategy. You are running on a hedonic treadmill, mistaking the endorphin rush of planning for the deep satisfaction of becoming. You have built a cage out of your own aspirations. You have bought into the lie that if you can just conquer every weakness and polish every rough edge, you will finally be safe, worthy, and happy. But this is a game you cannot win because the horizon of better recedes forever. The more you improve, the more refined your criticism becomes. You spot smaller and smaller flaws. The dissatisfaction doesn't disappear, it just becomes more sophisticated. So, here is the pivot point. If the path of relentless self-optimization leads only to burnout and doubt, what is the alternative? Are we doomed to mediocrity? Must we resign ourselves to our flaws and give up on our potential? Absolutely not. But we must fundamentally change the source of our striving. We must shift from a paradigm of fixing a broken self to a paradigm of expressing a whole one. We must learn to distinguish between the ego's need for validation and the soul's need for expansion. To break free from this cycle, we must first dissect the engine that keeps it running, the mechanism of the gap. When you look at your life, you are almost certainly measuring yourself against a horizon, an ideal future version of yourself who is wealthier, fitter, calmer, and more respected. You look forward at this vision, and you measure the distance between where you are standing now and that shimmering mirage in the distance. This distance is the gap, and living in the gap is a recipe for permanent misery. The problem is that the horizon is not a fixed point, it is a movable target. As you move toward it, it moves away from you. You might double your income, but your ideal self has already moved on to wanting triple. You might lose 20 pounds, but your ideal self now wants six-pack abs. By measuring yourself against a future that does not exist, you are condemning yourself to a state of perpetual lack. You are training your brain to register failure, even when you are succeeding, simply because you have not yet arrived at the destination. But here is the brutal truth. You never arrive. There is no magical day when the clouds part, the music swells, and a voice from the heavens declares, "You are finished. You are now good enough." This mindset creates a specific kind of fragility because your self-worth is tied to an external outcome. a number on a scale, a balance in a bank account, a job title. You are entirely vulnerable to the chaos of the world. The ancient Stoics warned us about this thousands of years ago. They differentiated between things that are up to us and things that are not up to us. Your character, your judgments, and your actions are up to you. Your reputation, your wealth, and even your health are ultimately not fully under your control. When you base your self-improvement on these external metrics, when you try to optimize your status or your body as a path to happiness, you are building your house on quicksand. You are handing the keys to your emotional well-being to the whims of the economy, the opinions of others, and the randomness of genetics. We must also confront the arrival fallacy, the delusion that once we achieve a certain goal, our internal state will permanently shift. We think, when I get that promotion, then I will feel confident. When I find a partner, then I will feel complete. But this is a lie. The external world cannot fix an internal problem. If you feel inadequate without the achievement, you will likely feel inadequate with it. You will simply find a new reason to doubt yourself, a new standard to fall short of. This is why we see millionaires who are terrified of poverty and supermodels who are convinced they are ugly. They have improved their circumstances, but they have not healed their relationship with themselves. They have simply upgraded the scenery of their suffering. Furthermore, this obsession with future optimization robs us of the only thing we actually possess, the present moment. We treat the present as nothing more than a waiting room for the future. We treat today as a stepping stone to a better tomorrow. We rush through our coffee, rush through our commute, and rush through our work, eyes fixed on the prize. But as the philosopher Seneca observed, we are dying every day. Every day that we spend obsessing over the future is a day we have lost. We are postponing our lives, waiting to become the person who is allowed to enjoy them. We are like actors rehearsing for a play that never opens, perfecting our lines for a performance that is always scheduled for someday. Not. This performative self-improvement also destroys our ability to enter the state of flow, that zone of optimal experience where we are fully immersed in what we are doing. Flow requires a surrender of the self. It requires you to forget yourself, to merge with the activity. But the modern self-improver is incapable of forgetting themselves. They are too busy monitoring their performance. They are watching themselves live rather than actually living. This hyper-reflectivity, this constant, "Am I doing this right?" acts as a brake on our natural intelligence and creativity. It creates a stutter in the soul. We become stiff, unnatural, and anxious, paralyzed by the weight of our own expectations. The irony is that true growth often comes from the exact opposite of this striving. It comes from what psychologist Carl Rogers called the paradox of change. The curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change. This is not resignation, it is a realignment of energy. When you stop fighting a war against your own nature, when you stop wasting 50% of your energy trying to hide your flaws or force yourself into a mold that doesn't fit, you suddenly have a surplus of energy available for actual growth. You stop trying to fix yourself and start trying to know yourself. This shift requires a new definition of success. It requires moving from success as achievement to success as alignment. Instead of asking, "What do I need to fix?" ask yourself, "What is my nature and how can I work with it?" Instead of forcing yourself to wake up at 5 a.m. because a guru told you to, ask yourself when your mind is actually most alert. Instead of trying to crush your anxiety, ask what your anxiety is trying to tell you about the life you are living. This approach is not about optimization, it is about integration. It is about taking the fragmented parts of your psyche, the ambitious part, the lazy part, the fearful part, the joyful part, and bringing them into a coherent whole. We must also be wary of the toxic positivity that permeates the self-help world. We are told to banish negative thoughts, to vibrate higher, to never give up. But this denial of the negative is itself a negative experience. It forces us to repress our inner struggles, and as psychology warns, the emotions we repress do not disappear, they grow denser and more complex in the unconscious. A true path of growth must include the capacity to sit with discomfort, to acknowledge failure, and to accept that sometimes life is simply difficult. Real resilience is not about pretending everything is fine. It is about the strength to endure when it isn't. It is about looking at the worst-case scenario, as the Stoics did with their premeditatio malorum, and realizing that even if the hardest challenges arrive, you will still be standing. You will still be you. So, how do we step off this treadmill? How do we continue to grow without falling into the trap of self-doubt? We must shift our focus from the goal to the process. We must detach our self-worth from the outcome of our actions and attach it solely to the quality of our effort. You cannot control whether you get the job, but you can control how well you prepare. You cannot control whether the audience applauds, but you can control the sincerity of your performance. When you focus on the process, you are always in control. You are always winning as long as you are showing up. This is the secret that the Achievement Society hides from you. You are not a project. You are not a problem to be solved. You are a process to be experienced. The value of your life is not measured by how much you improve, but by how deeply you engage with the reality in front of you. This brings us to the most dangerous lie sold by the modern self-improvement industry, the myth of absolute control. You are told that you are the CEO of your life, the captain of your soul, and that if you just visualize hard enough, hustle long enough, and hack your biology effectively enough, you can bend reality to your will. This narrative is seductive because it plays to our deepest desire for omnipotence, but it is also a recipe for profound mental illness. When you believe that you are solely responsible for every outcome in your life, you are claiming a power that belongs only to gods. You are taking the weight of the entire universe, the economy, the weather, the moods of other people, the chaotic role of luck, and placing it squarely on your own shoulders. Yeah. When things inevitably go wrong, when the business fails despite your hard work, when the diet doesn't cure the disease, when the relationship ends despite your best efforts, you don't just feel disappointment. You feel guilt. You feel that you have failed a moral test. You harshly criticize yourself, looking for the flaw in your routine that caused the universe to disobey you. We must retreat to the sanity of the ancient Stoics to heal this wound. Epictetus, a man who spent much of his life as a slave and understood better than anyone the limits of power, gave us the ultimate tool for mental freedom, the dichotomy of control. He taught that some things are up to us and some things are not up to us. Up to us are our judgments, our intentions, our desires, and our character. Not up to us is literally everything else: our body, our property, our reputation, and our command. The modern optimizer tries to control the not up to us category. You obsess over the number on the scale, the number in the bank account, and the number of likes on a post. You tie your happiness to these external metrics, which are always subject to the whims of fortune. This is why you feel fragile. This is why you feel that low-level hum of anxiety. You have leveraged your self-worth on assets you do not own. To find true stability, you must withdraw your emotional investment from the outcome and place it entirely on the process. You must reach a point where you can say, "I have done my best and the rest is not my business." This requires a radical shift in how we set goals. In the world of toxic productivity, a goal is a contract you sign with yourself. I will achieve X or I am a failure. In the world of sane progress, we add what the Stoics called a reserve clause. We say, I will achieve X, fate permitting, or I will sail across the ocean if nothing prevents me. This is not an excuse for laziness. It is an acknowledgement of reality. It means you commit 100% of your effort to the task, but you commit 0% of your self-worth to the result. You become like an archer. You focus entirely on your stance, your aim, and your release. These are within your control. But once the arrow leaves the bow, it belongs to the wind. If a gust blows it off course, you do not weep. You do not curse yourself. You simply draw another arrow and aim again. Furthermore, we must question the very nature of improvement. The current model is additive. We think we need to add more habits, add more knowledge, add more accolades to become complete. We treat ourselves like empty vessels that need to be filled. But what if the opposite is true? What if the path to your best self is not about adding, but about subtracting? Consider the metaphor of the sculpture. A block of marble does not need to acquire the statue inside it. The statue is already there, buried under layers of excess stone. The sculptor's job is not to add anything, but to chip away the unessential, to remove the mud of social conditioning, the fear of judgment, the false beliefs about what makes you happy, and the ego that screams for validation. This is via negativa, growth by subtraction. When you stop trying to add a new morning routine and instead subtract the anxiety that keeps you up at night, you improve. When you stop trying to add a new persona to impress people and subtract the need for their approval, you become charismatic naturally. When you stop trying to add more productivity apps and subtract the distractions that fragment your attention, you enter the state of flow effortlessly. This subtractive approach reveals a startling truth. You are not a fixer-upper project. You are not broken. You are simply covered in dust. The frantic scrubbing of the self-improvement treadmill often just grinds the dust in deeper. Sometimes the most progressive thing you can do is to stop fixing, to stop judging, to stop striving for a future version of yourself and simply inhabit the version that is breathing right now. This leads us to the concept of the autotelic personality, a term coined by the psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. The autotelic person does not do things for a future reward. They do things because the doing itself is the reward. They do not work to retire. They work because they love the craft. They do not learn to pass a test. They learn because they are curious. This shift destroys the gap between where you are and where you want to be, because you are always exactly where you need to be, immersed in the action of the present. When you live this way, you become unbreakable. Success cannot spoil you because you know it is just a side effect, not the main event. Failure cannot crush you because you know that the only true failure is the failure to try. You step off the treadmill of becoming and step onto the solid ground of being. But there is one final terrifying hurdle to clear. To truly embrace this way of living, you must make peace with the one thing the self-optimization industry is desperately trying to help you outrun. You must make peace with your own mortality. We are finally staring at the root of the problem. Why do we obsess over progress? Why are we so terrified of being average or unproductive? Because deep down we believe that if we build a big enough fortress of achievements, we can keep the end of our time out. We treat self-improvement as an immortality project. We unconsciously believe that if we are fit enough, rich enough, and disciplined enough, we will become exceptions to the biological rule. We are trying to become what the philosopher Ernest Becker called causa sui, the father of ourselves. We want to prove that we are not just biological accidents destined to perish, but self-created gods who have earned the right to exist forever through sheer force of will. This is the vital lie that drives the modern world, and it is exhausting because it is impossible to maintain. You can optimize your sleep, your diet, and your workflow, but you cannot optimize your way out of the human condition. You are a creature. You are finite. You are vulnerable, and no amount of life hacking will change that. The moment you accept this, the moment you truly surrender to the fact that you are going to die and that your ideal self is a fantasy that will never breathe, something incredible happens. The pressure bursts. The heavy armor you have been wearing to protect your ego falls to the floor. You realize that you do not need to earn your life. You do not need to justify your existence with a perfectly checked to-do list. You are here, briefly, to experience the world, not to conquer it. The Stoics had a beautiful metaphor for this. They said life is like a play. It does not matter if the play is long or short. It does not matter if you are on stage for 5 acts or only 3. What matters is that while you are on stage, you play your role with sincerity, with courage, and with style. As the ancient philosophers reminded themselves, a play does not need to be long to be meaningful. You can exit the stage contented, knowing you played your part well. When you view your life this way, the paradox of progress dissolves. You still learn, you still grow, you still build, but you do it with a lightness of spirit. You do it because it is in your nature to grow, just as it is in the nature of a tree to reach for the sun. The tree does not stress about whether it is taller than the tree next to it. It does not judge itself for losing leaves in the winter. It simply is. So, here is your liberation. You are allowed to be unfinished. You are allowed to have flaws that you never fix. You are allowed to have days where you produce nothing but carbon dioxide. True success is not a destination you arrive at in the future. It is the quality of your presence right now. It is the ability to close the gap between your ambition and your reality, not by lowering your standards, but by accepting that the struggle is the standard. Stop waiting for the better you to arrive. He is not coming. She is not coming. The only version of you that exists is the one reading these words. And that version, with all its cracks and imperfections, is capable of joy, capable of contribution, and capable of peace. The project is canceled. The optimization is over. You are free to simply live.